Another video, and today we are reacting to today we are reacting to the craziest drugs that you have never heard of. Drugs is really a big problem in South Africa, but yeah, let's hear what those guys will say. So please like, comment, and subscribe, and let's get to 400 subscribers. Yeah, that's basically the goal. No, 1,000. Let's get to 1,000 subscribers.
At this point in YouTube history, I think everybody has watched at least one video about crazy or obscure drugs. And while these videos are interesting, usually if you've seen one, you've seen them all, and typically the entries are rather surface level. Fortunately, this video is different. We're gonna cover drugs that are so random and so unknown by the general public that even super niche internet communities don't know about them. Oh yeah, and this list gets crazier as it goes on. Let's begin. Salvinorin B methoxymethyl ether. If you thought of salvia when you heard Salvinorin in the jumbled mess of scientific smart people speak, then you would be correct. But this isn't just regular salvia. This video is about drugs you've never heard of, and this stuff is way crazier than regular salvia. In fact, I think a good name for this would be super salvia. But in case you're unfamiliar with regular salvia, let me recap quickly. You see, with regular salvia, from every trip report that I've seen, using salvia is almost a guaranteed miserable time. And even at that, the bar is so low for salvia that even a good experience is pretty much just not being as traumatized as the majority of people that take it. But Salvinorin B isn't regular salvia. This drug is salvia's crackhead cousin. Honestly, for all intents and purposes, this drug is probably one of the most cursed compounds ever made for a variety of reasons. For starters, the National Library of Medicine states that this chemical is among the most potent and selective kappa opioids known. And in this case, stronger is not always better. To this day, there has only ever been one reliable Salvinorin B trip report. And that's simply because even some of the most seasoned psychonauts don't want to touch it. Likely because it's a cursed.
I've never heard of this drug at all. I've never heard of this. I don't know what he's talking about.
With a ridiculously long half-life. According to sources, Salvinorin B is 5 times more potent than Salvinorin A and lasts for a duration of 2 to 3 hours, which brings using this drug into the realm of sheer insanity. If you are crazy enough to want to try this drug, you would need to heavily mentally prepare yourself beforehand, because breakthrough drugs like salvia and DMT are known to cause time dilation, which means that your trip could feel longer than it actually is in real life. Time dilation is one of those things that's commonly discussed online, yet nobody really knows how or why it happens. In a post I found on the DMT forum, a user states, "I felt like I lived an entirely different life in the DMT world. It felt like 10 years or so. I even had a family." And if that's not crazy enough, another user commented on this post saying, "This happened to me on salvia and I had absolutely no awareness of this life. I lived a whole lifetime in another life, and then zap, I'm in my bedroom. It was unsettling to me." And another user discussing his trip wrote, "What feels like an eternity only lasted 15 minutes. Keep in mind, this is just regular salvia, which only lasts 5 to 20 minutes. Considering Salvinorin B is 5 times more potent and lasts about 15 times longer, it's no wonder why so few even dare to try it. So what happened to the person that did take this compound? Well, for that we actually need to look at the research paper. Yeah, a research paper. The doctors here had the psychonaut in the study measure his dose in micrograms, which is extremely tiny. An average dose of regular salvia is measured in milligrams, which is obviously much more. The psychonaut in this study, which is basically just a fancy name for someone who likes psychedelics, said the following about his experience with Salvinorin B. "My head was observed to retract, and my face was frozen in a frighteningly blank expression as if I were having a stroke. My hands adopted a strange pose and waved around very slowly, alternately creepily awkward and graceful. I remembered none of this." Then, when talking about actually breaking through on the chemical, which basically means losing track of your current reality and entering hyperspace, they wrote, "I wasn't actually perceiving any objects in my environment. It was my mind that I was perceiving as a manifestation of the movement."
This sounds crazy. Yo, what this guy saying that basically 5 minutes feels like eternity, bro. That's crazy. Imagine having a family and having your whole life ahead of you in 5 minutes. Like, I don't understand that. That's so crazy, bro. Like, imagine like you die, right? And then 5 minutes before you die, you just take this drug and it feels like you lived your whole life already. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Dimensional object through a 4-dimensional membrane. whatever that means. Considering this was such a minuscule dose, I can't imagine the trip report someone might come back with if they took a full send level dose. Luckily for you guys, there is actually one other trip report on the entire internet, although it isn't reliable as an actual research paper. This trip report is simply titled, "I cannot comprehend what happened," and it's actually written by a career chemist who synthesized the compound himself, and upon taking it was transported into an entirely different life in the 1950s. This is his quote on the experience. "I fell through my floor into an endless array of eerie sounds. I eventually reached the bottom and felt my body hit the ground. A creature walked towards me and grabbed me by the neck and said, 'I don't know what you're doing,' in a disturbing voice. Then he threw me up and I landed. I stood up and realized that I was in the 1950s. The trip went from impossible events to me simply existing in a different time. I walked around on this street and found a newspaper on the ground. I could read each and every article, and on the top it read August 6th, 1953. I didn't know that it wasn't real. It was all I knew. I could remember my life, but it wasn't me. It was the life of a person that I was in 1953. I could remember my childhood, school years, first job, everything. As potentially cool as it may seem to almost time travel, this one part of this one story doesn't make this compound seem any less terrifying. 4-CMA. Like many of the obscure chemicals on this list, finding information on 4-CMA is not easy. That's
I'm quickly gonna go get another piece of sucker. I'm really hungry right now.
Know what research chemicals are? They're basically synthetic chemicals that were Frankensteined in a lab as part of a research project in an attempt to either improve on an existing chemical or to create an entirely new drug. Basically, research chemicals are the result of scientists crafting random stuff like they're brewing potions in Minecraft. The thing is, most of these chemicals don't make the cut, typically because they either have terrible side effects or they aren't useful medically, or they just lost funding on the research. If the established drugs that most people know about are the tip of the iceberg, then research chemicals pretty much cover the rest of the iceberg all the way to the bottom. 4-CMA is a research chemical that was originally synthesized in the 1960s, as it was supposed to be a stimulant that behaved similarly to an amphetamine. Despite what scientists expected, however, 4-CMA had a much more antidepressant effect than stimulant effect in test subjects. But because it was mildly pleasant to use, drug dealers actually pressed this into their own pills to evade authorities. According to sources, 4-CMA was first identified at the Tomorrowland Festival in 2015, where a tablet was found in the possession of a drug dealer. Then it seemed to have disappeared, while a study conducted in 2019 reported detection of 4-CMA in pills once again. Now you might be curious, why is the slightly pleasant antidepressant on this list? Well, it turns out that this drug is highly neurotoxic to its users. In studies done with rats, it was found to permanently reduce serotonin, and in further studies done on it, it was also found that, quote, administration of 4-CMA caused a prolonged reduction in the levels of serotonin in the brain 1 month after injecting a single dose of the drug. In other words, it physically kills your serotonin receptors permanently. Now, to make things worse, there are still vendors that are knowingly selling this toxic chemical with no regard for the general public. This is bad because these drugs can easily end up in a wide variety of recreational pressed pills that are sold on the black market. In regards to this, in the Research Chemicals subreddit, one user wrote, "Nice. A substance that could fry your brain like only a lifetime of MDMA use could in one sitting," which I feel is pretty accurate. And it's even been reported that abusing this chemical could leave you with, quote, an irreversible depression.
To be honest, I'm actually learning as the video is going on, bro. Some of these drugs I've never heard of in my life. Yeah, the title is so true. I've never heard of these drugs. And I never really had like experience with drugs or anything like that, because like one thing I like about colored people are really like known for drugs and stuff like that. You see, so I've never really been pressured to take drugs or anything like that, you see, because drug is really a big problem when it comes to the colored community and stuff like that. But yeah, let's get on watching.
An MDMA come down every day for the rest of your life. Although it's been speculating that reaching this state would require multiple large doses over a long period of time, if you don't want to take the chance at permanently damaging your serotonin neurons, I would strongly recommend staying away from this drug. I almost want to call 4-CMA super MDMA, but it's really not the case. It's honestly just the worst of both worlds. The upside of MDMA is completely subdued in 4-CMA, and the downside of MDMA is amplified to such an extreme degree there is absolutely no no value in the trade-off. Pyros. No, not the TF2 pyro. Pyros is an abbreviated word for the class of drugs known as pyrrolidinopherones. And they're pretty much crack on crack. If you remember the bath salts epidemic from about a decade ago, well, pyros are to blame. They're pretty well known in the fringe drug community as being the most addictive class of chemicals on Earth. And when I say most addictive, I'm talking about 20 times more addictive than crack. These drugs are absolutely insane, and they don't even hold a candle to the mainstream drugs known for their addictiveness. For example, with commonly known drugs, most people actively decide to stop using it before their supply runs out. This is definitely not the case with this stuff. Barely anyone in recorded history has started using a supply of Pyros and just stopped halfway through out of sheer willpower. In most stories on the internet, people who start a stash of Pyros only end their days-long bender because they became full-blown psychotic and ended up in a psych ward, or if they're lucky, started seeing shadow people early on and got scared enough to flush the rest of their supply down the toilet. But this stuff is so addictive that I'm convinced somebody has flushed their stash down the toilet and then immediately gone sewer diving afterwards on a quest to find his precious like Gollum in Lord of the Rings. Because of this, even the most seasoned drug users won't take this stuff because the compulsion to take more is practically impossible to overcome. In hindsight, it's no wonder we had a bath salts zombie epidemic. Just to clarify, bath salts are literally just Pyros. Imagine you're trying to quit a chemical that's 50 times more addictive than crack, and every time you make a stop at the gas station for your nightly Twinkies, a scraggly old dude in the back who smells like salami is tempting you to buy it for a couple bucks. The thing about the bath salts epidemic sold them would just hire some armchair chemist on the internet to look for slightly different chemicals on the dark web that kinda look the same. Keep in mind, they wouldn't even know what the side effects would be. So basically, they were pretty much just selling random research chemicals to homeless people as test subjects. Because of this, a lot of people got caught up in bath salts addiction around 2012 because they had no idea how addictive they would be. But that's not even it. The most diabolical aspect of Pyros is that they make you extremely horny. I'm not joking. Like a 64-hour edge session with no break or sleep until you literally pass out from exhaustion or get submitted to urgent care. They say that meth can turn you into a gooning degenerate, but this stuff is like meth times 5. To make matters even worse, somewhere along the way, armchair chemists on the internet somehow figured to conveniently turn this compound into vape juice, which pretty much makes this invention the world's worst jewel. So the next time your mom gets mad at you for your vaping addiction, feel free to remind her that there's some 45-year-old dude with scraggly hair in his basement vaping super crack and jorking it for 10 days straight. The amount of gooning behavior Pyros cause would literally make your average Discord moderator look like a Buddhist monk. Long story short, outside of their extremely addictive qualities, these drugs are well known for turning you into a D1 gooner. Like legitimately, the Michael Jordan easily makes you the biggest degenerate in the world. Trust me when I say, Pyros are one diabolical class of drugs. 5-MeO-DMT. 5-MeO-DMT is basically DMT's mysterious grandfather. If you think the sorcerers we talked about in the medieval video were mysterious, you'll be even more intrigued by this chemical compound. This chemical is sometimes nicknamed the God molecule, and surprisingly, unlike other chemicals on this list, this substance is actually naturally occurring. But this isn't found in a mushroom or tree bark like normal drugs. 5-MeO-DMT is naturally occurring in toad venom, of all things. I mean, talk about hardcore. Unlike the more forgiving and consistently spiritual trip brought on by regular DMT, whether or not 5-MeO-DMT is going to be a glowing spiritual experience or an existential crisis was basically a coin flip. And that's a problem, because if you choose to inhale this stuff, it is reported that this trip could last up to 2 hours, which is 8 times longer than regular DMT's duration of roughly 15 minutes. And unlike most psychedelics, in which people usually report pleasant experiences when they use the drug with reverence and respect, 5-MeO-DMT doesn't care how nicely you treat it. And that sucks, because if you have a bad time, you could have a very bad time for up to 2 hours. Additionally, in my armchair psychologist opinion, I'd wager that a bad trip on 5-MeO-DMT is at least 10 times worse than a bad trip on regular DMT. To prove this point, I'm calling upon a popular website known to host trip reports. On this website, there's a category for bad trips. For context, with regular DMT, some titles of bad trip reports include First Breakthrough, Ego Loss and Bad Trip, Accelerating the Evil and Ego Death.
To be honest, toad venom is crazy, bro. Toad venom is crazy. Who even thinks of toad venom? Like, crazy.
A cautionary tale. Prepared liftoff into the worst case scenario, and too much for a first time. Which, to be honest, pretty much sounds like they either took too much or experienced ego death, which is kind of a normie experience with psychedelics. Now, on the other hand, here are the titles for bad trip reports on 5-MeO-DMT. Existential horror. pure horror, facing psychedelic terror, unimaginable depths of terror, and I ended up praying to Jesus Christ. Yeah, it's not a super fun way to spend your Sunday afternoon. Honestly, as a word of caution, if you're prone to existential anxiety, I would shy away from reading any bad trip reports altogether. Now, it seems like a common theme in these reports that people actually think that they're about to die or actually dying while on the drug. Now, I don't know about you, but taking a drug that makes me believe I'm actually dead and now my only friends are Casper the Ghost, the Grim Reaper, and Harambe totally sounds like a blast. Not. One reason for these reoccurring death themes in trips might be that 5-MeO-DMT is one of the only psychedelics that has the actual capability to kill you. You see, usually psychedelics can't kill you unless you do something really dumb under the influence. 5-MeO-DMT is different though, because unlike most psychedelics, this drug has caused death in at least 2 cases, with the 3 major causes being, quote, suffocation after vomiting, lung shutting down, and cardiac arrest. One interesting trip report I found about 5-MeO-DMT wrote, I cannot emphasize enough how insanely weird, alien, and utterly cosmic this felt. Like I'd broken some type of rule and I'd entered an entirely different universe of some type. If you ask me, 5-MeO-DMT is nothing to mess with at all. Before we get into the last entry on this list, I want to make 2 quick notes. 1, this video was actually a top 10, not top 5, but because of time reasons, we cut it in half. With that being said, the second part to this video is even crazier than this first part you're currently watching. Due to the nature of this video, it's rather risky for me to post videos like this, so unless you guys really want part 2, I likely won't post it. If you enjoyed this video and want to see the next even more crazy compounds, please tell me you want it in the comments, and maybe if this video gets 20,000 likes, we'll do it. So with that being said, let's get to the last entry on this list, technically the first half, Duster. I know what you might be thinking. What on earth do you mean by duster? The nickname your elementary school bully gave you in 4th grade? A brush for dusks? Okay, nobody was thinking that one. No, I mean air duster. Air duster is the one drug that I can't state this clearly enough, you never want to use. And the reason is way more insidious than you may think. Duster kills your brain cells. By the way, air duster is not just compressed air in a can. The reason air duster is actually considered a drug is because it's mostly a refrigerant, not air. And because this gas is heavier than air, when most people are using it, their voice becomes very deep
and my voice gets really low
and sounds like a monster. Basically, when you inhale, the chemical replaces all of the oxygen in your lungs and removes carbon dioxide in the same way that regular air does. All the while, your body is getting tricked into thinking that it's inhaling oxygen because there's no carbon dioxide building up. This causes the user to get hypoxic, which is basically another word for painless brain suffocation. Essentially, duster makes you suffocate without your brain sending you into fight or flight mode, which often causes euphoria as a byproduct. This might sound cool or fun until you realize that every time you get high, you're giving yourself insane amounts of brain damage. This is because your brain can only bear around 2 to 5 minutes of hypoxia before your brain cells die permanently. To make things even worse, usually duster abusers will use this stuff for hours on end or until they pass out. So instead of just minutes of killing their brain cells, they're doing it for hours a day. According to numerous anecdotal sources I've seen across online, this is one of the hardest drugs in the world to quit. I know this sounds ridiculous, but this is a reoccurring theme on this list. For example, in a post titled "My Story of Air Duster Addiction," one user on Reddit wrote about how addictive this stuff can really be. In this post, he writes about the first time he tried it. Quote, "One blast and I was done for. I felt like I needed to feel this way for the rest of my life. I cannot describe the euphoria." Then, according to his story, he went to rehab, but immediately after he got out, he relapsed, writing, "I got a job that I lost, but I received a paycheck for around $200 and literally went on a ridiculous binge on Duster in my car in the Walmart parking lot. I easily huffed over 50 cans in a 48-hour period. I seriously couldn't stop." He ends the story with saying, quote, "This stuff will make a mess of you and will take you down faster than any hard drugs out there. This is not some kiddie drug. Like I've said, I've tried everything, and nothing has compared to the insane rush of euphoria you get from Duster. If you use Duster, even short lengths of abuse can cause permanent brain damage, serious memory problems, seizures, loss of IQ, a loss of one's ability to focus, confusion, a permanent loss of coordination, permanent slurred speech, and death." With that being said, the biggest reason to not use Duster is the fact that Walmart, of all things, would become your new drug dealer, which might be one of the lamest ways to die of all time. On a big forum called "Do You Know Anyone Who Permanently Fried Their Brain from Drugs?" to nobody's surprise, Duster and inhalants in general was the most commonly mentioned drug in the replies. And that's because most drugs don't kill your brain matter. Many of them will change your brain's chemistry, but in most cases, your brain can make a full recovery over a long enough period of time. But this is not the case with Duster. In response to this question, one person in this thread wrote, "I worked at a movie theater, had a coworker who was above average intelligence. He got into inhaling air cans. After 3 months, he was pretty much the dumbest person I ever knew. He didn't make much sense and he thought everything was so funny. Another user wrote about their duster experience, and I think it's safe to say that this stuff is definitely no joke. According to the poster, they, quote, probably inhaled dust off 3 to 10 times a day for 2 years. Then they talk about when they finally quit it. Quote, by the time I stopped, I could not understand language much. I couldn't understand the concept of family or why anything worked how it was supposed to work. Sometimes I read and words suddenly looked like foreign shapes to me, and I can't
You know, this is kind of reminding me of what Wicked. Something like that drug in America. This kind of, I think it is. Is this Duster and Wicked the same thing? I don't even know. But yeah, let's carry on watching.
my head. I'm lucky I'm not like that to this day. Yeah. Definitely don't take this drug if you value your life. All in all, I'd wager even the most hardcore drug nerds out there haven't heard of at least one of the chemicals I mentioned on this list. But if not, don't worry, because this is just the tip of the iceberg. Because like I mentioned earlier, there is another list ready to go if you guys want it. To summarize, some key takeaways are, don't use 5-MeO-DMT unless you want to buy a 2-hour timeshare in the shadow realm. If the weird guy from high school who took way too much interest in organic chemistry tells you he has some super salvia, don't take it. If a smelly looking guy with a blank stare starts eyeballing the air duster in your shop.
Exactly a great video. I really enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I'm actually just feeling a bit sick. That's why, like, for the low energy and stuff like that in the video. But you know, the grind always has to continue, guys. So thank you guys for watching, and thank you guys for coming to the end of the video. That means a lot. Please like, comment, subscribe, all the good stuff. And yeah, I'm gonna drop a video of vlog real soon again. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. I'm out. Peace.